of what's self-love got to do with it. And today we are looking at shadow work and emotional wound healing. And what I intend to do with our time together is assist you in how you are perceiving and interacting with your shadow work and your emotional wound healing. And I want to point out things that can trip you or trick you on the process and elongate your time in the heavy and dark experiences. And I'm hopeful to do this in about 10 to 15 minutes. So when you are exploring shadow work, when you are starting to do the emotional wound healing, you do it generally because you recognize that you are prevented from having, being, doing, feeling, etc., something that you want. So let's call that the vision. You notice one way or another that you may be causing your own problems or stuck in patterns. And if you are on the path, and to me the path is all paths, spiritually we are all growing, whether we are active and conscious in that process or not. So when I'm talking about the path, I mean more a conscious recognition and maybe even celebration of your intention towards self-mastery, self-realization. And to me, that means that you are intending to come to a place where you allow yourself to be fully who you are, with access to your gifts in a way that you are able to sustainably contribute them to others. So let's say towards that intention, you recognize, you notice, you bump into patterns that you have internally, patterns of thinking or feeling or focusing, or patterns externally in your relationship dynamics, your habits, etc., that are preventing you from being essentially your best self. And I will underline that the patterns that you're running into externally are still a reflection of internal patterns. And what I find behind all misbehavior and faulty, or let's say like less than fun patterns, are misbeliefs. And the beliefs that we're looking at in healing have kind of like branches. So you have branches around communication. It's okay to say this, not okay to say this. They kind of like almost like roots or veins, etc. They like branch out. And when you're healing, at first you kind of tend to some of the smaller branches, the ones that seem more manageable or that you can identify, but all of them are still downstream from the fundamental misbelief that you aren't who you are. And who you are, from my vantage point, is an expression of the divine. And there are beliefs that break off of that one, like I'm not worthy, I have to do something to justify my being, I'm not supported, I'm not safe, I die, there's time. There are these beliefs that are above the other beliefs that we generally move towards in healing. And what I found is that if you want to get the lower branches, you can certainly address them singly, one-to-one, and there can be value in that. I try to, as best I can, validate what is natural to you. There is no correct way. I'm sharing with you my perspective, my experience. It's personal. It's what I've done for myself. It's also what I've facilitated and witnessed in clients. Is it right for you? I don't know. What I hope is to offer, if nothing else, the belief in the possibility that it can be done and that you can do it your own way. So if you find that you're drawn to the lower branches and that feels or resonates as correct for you, there's likely a wisdom to that. Don't fight you. Don't fight you. That's one of the beliefs above the other beliefs, that you naturally don't know what to do and that your mind needs to become involved, or you need to look to the outside for guidance. from my vantage point, we are all uniquely guided. We are all uniquely supported. You have a wisdom of your own. So the belief that I found kind of like underlying all the other ones, and there's still some above it, but one of the leverage points in healing is self is the opposite of self-rejection, which is essentially self-acceptance, which is essentially not applying judgment to yourself or your life or really anything. And judgment doesn't necessarily mean I judge this as good and I judge this as bad. Judgment includes, I know what this is, I understand where this comes from, I can analyze, etc. You judge elements to be, I judge this to be pink, I judge this to be green. And yet while there is discernment, there is also a recognition that you cannot truly understand and you cannot truly really like map it. If we started to talk about the marker, my grandma mailed me these. To do that, she, took these steps. She bought them. They came from a store, a factory. Like the marker, when you're holding it, it's like, oh, it's just the marker. But when you start to talk about it and use it in your analysis, you almost exclude all of those other factors. And the other factors are as real as any of the other ones. And that's to say, when you're talking about causes, what's behind things, it's a little bit more complex. And you can get lost in those branches and lose the point of what you're trying to do. So I was saying self-acceptance which is essentially silence or non-judgment, non-resistance, can heal a lot of the branches that break off of it. And they break, I'll set that part of the conversation down, and we're going to go to another illustration of shadow work and emotional wound healing. So I opened today and I said, hopefully I'll be able to give you some things that you can use so that your process doesn't suck so much. And one of the traps or tricks in the shadow work, emotional wound healing category, is you start to make it about the shadow, about the wound. And really, why those are on your radar is, again, where you think that they're going, which is this realization of self, being who you know you are, who you can be, feeling like you're doing it, you're on path, you're on purpose, you're who you're meant to be, you're who you can be. So it isn't about the shadow, it isn't about the wound, it isn't about the stories about them, it is about what exists beyond them. And yet you can't ignore those elements. If you could, you can't. But let's say, yeah, you can't, as far as I can tell. And I emphasize this I talk about this from different angles at different times, but you can't, what you're looking for and fighting, what you're hoping to get or what you're hoping to dominate externally is a reflection of your inner experience. And that means that, let's take a few breaths because I got myself real excited. Hold on. I'm going to put that one down too. I did an earlier edition of this topic and I came in to my meditation cushion to film at a very high, elevated, emotional, energetic level because I was dancing before. And after I finished the broadcast and I was working on uploading it onto YouTube and doing the write-out, I realized that I hadn't organized the information that I could give in the way that best served my audience. And so I made my ass sit back down. Here we are again. And that has been, so if we're looking at the realization journey, so I'll use mine as an example, I feel called to provide insight to people. Like, I love, teaching gives me joy. It is my joy. On the path to do that in the way that I know that I could do that, I encountered a shadow. a lot, but the one we'll talk about is the one where in some ways I was using that skill to justify my being, to prove that I was enough, to hide from my own wounds. And that behavior prevented me from fully accessing and doing what I could do because it wasn't coming from a whole place. When we're healing, we're coming to wholeness. Wholeness to me means that you recognize that your peace, your happiness, your source of life and love is within. When you have wholeness, you are balanced in your decision making, or more balanced, because we're always learning and growing, and you are less likely to do or take on something that feels wrong for you, because why would you? So if you have love for yourself, will you take on a relationship to get love? If the relationship doesn't fit and truly add to your life, probably not. But if you haven't fully realized the love that you have within, and someone wants to be in relationship with you, you'll think, oh, I'll get love from here, subconsciously. And you might take on an environment that actually doesn't support your thriving because you think it's going to give you something you don't have. So one way to think about shadow work is, imagine that you got a house, and behind the house is kind of like, if you've ever seen the movie or read the book The Secret Garden, it's kind of like this wildness that hasn't been tended to for a long time, which has a beauty to it. But let's say that you want to start to cultivate your garden intentionally and start to create a yield that you can enjoy and share. Shadow work is recognizing you got shit to do to the plot behind your house before it becomes its highest expression, which again will always continue to grow, but let's say like to a point of thriving, to at least a point of self-sustainability. There's shit you gotta do. There's digging, there's maybe some kind of like removal. Hey guys, removal of stuff. I'm talking about shadow work and wound healing today. There's likely things you have to clean out. Shadow work, the primary tip and trick is, do not make it about the shit that you're cleaning up. Make it about the vision. And at the same time, you have to do and feel through the activities that will realize the vision. What are those activities? They're being honest with yourself about what you're doing. They're becoming, it's a process of becoming aware of how you're using your attention, your energy, your power, etc. It's taking ownership of those choices. It's feeling however you feel about not doing that previously, and any of the events that trained you to develop in those ways. And it's so easy with our cultural conditioning to make things about understanding. Somehow we have taken, instead of being with the simplicity, we have instead developed almost like a reverence for the intellect and the ability to explain, which kind of abstracts you from reality. Because like I said, you can never say you can never say what is. You just can't. And when we're looking at healing, some of the trips, or the trips and the tip where you get stuck, is you learn how to really well explain why your garden isn't the way that you want it. That does not make the garden better. In fact, it kind of creates almost this museum type structure around the shit that you're supposed to be getting rid of so that you can have the garden that you want. And when I was talking earlier about beliefs and kind of like how they span out, one of them is worth. And not having worth can show up as, my opinions don't matter, my emotions don't matter, I need to give up my values, etc., to compromise. All of that is like, I am not worthy. And I am not worthy can be one of the beliefs that operate in the process of shadow work and wound healing, that elongate them, because in some way within you, you don't think that you deserve to be on the other side. You should suffer. And the way to correct that is, again, that self-rejection piece, where when you notice that you have set up a memorial to the shit that you should be cleaning up, rather than be mean to you about it, rather than talk about how you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you sit very quietly, you feel your lungs, you breathe, and accept that you are not doing what you think you should. That is self-acceptance. You have small self, Shaylee, then you have large self, life, and they are inseparable. And when you reject life, which would be circumstances or conditions, you are rejecting yourself as well. And that is one of the root beliefs that cause misbehavior in other places. So when you're shadow working, it really is about being quiet about it enough that you can feel what is there underlyingly. And it's uncomfortable, man. It's uncomfortable. Depending on how much junk you have to unpack, you might be there for a minute. However, if you are accepting of that process, if you are accepting of that leg of the adventure on your overall path to self-realization, then you are in some ways providing the necessary access to energy and healing to let it progress. And that really is, it's about focus. Are you focusing on the dirt hole? Or are you in the hole while you look forward to the vision? You can feel the depth of the hole. You can be all shitty and dirty and know it's still okay and that this is a natural part of the process forward. So, I don't generally focus on shadow work and healing in my content at this point. I went through a phase when I was going through my healing where I was like, abuse, trauma, abuse, trauma. And that was what I needed to do to allow myself to recognize within myself I experienced those things. You have to see what you're cleaning up. And that can be very scary because on some levels you might think you might not be able to handle it, or that then reinforces you're not worthy, or you won't be able to go or do what you want. There are ways that you will perceiving that prevent you from actually looking at, like, okay, there's a hole over here in the garden. If I want to put a bench, I got to fill it in. But if you are afraid or don't think that you have the skills or tools to do it, you won't. And yet through the witnessing, those things seem to arise. I've been talking more recently about asking for divine assistance. It works. And it can take a little bit to allow yourself to let that be true, because it shifts some of the beliefs higher up around who am I, how do things work, am I in control? No, you're not in control. I'm sorry. You're not in control. Not in the ways that you think that you are. And what you can do is just ask for it to be a gradual, divinely held process where you come to see that you are supported and that you don't even really want to be in control. A Course in Miracles talks about how that's the only illusion that we're giving up is the illusion of separation, and that's kind of like at the top of all the beliefs, and that's the one I was saying about being essentially divine. And when you heal that misbelief, then it changes how you would approach all the other ones, and that had been my path. I had so many jacked up things here and too many things in my garden I was afraid to look at. It wasn't until I was able to connect with the awareness of divinity that I had the guts or the courage or the belief that it was even possible to look at things as they were. And what's really cool about this is it's not as bad as you think. If you want to make it a story, a pity story, a victim story, etc., which again, you may because of beliefs on your thing, but that's not you. It's not you. Those are choices of interpretation, and just recognizing that you can make another choice, create space to consider, like, do I really need to feel this bad about it? Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Does anybody have any comments, questions, thoughts, feelings, etc. before I close? Like I said, I did this earlier. and it was a little bit more passionate, but probably harder to follow. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that one up, but if you did watch this one, I would love to hear what is helpful or basically what's helpful, what's working for you, where are you at, what are you using. And then I also work with clients one-to-one to bring them to the awareness of their own power, who they truly are, what they have already within. I'm only ever clearing off the shit that's not and revealing what has always been. I say this a lot in broadcasts, the only expert that I am is the expert in you being your own expert, how I can take you back to that awareness, and it can be a process, a progression towards that depending on where you're starting. But if you feel called in that direction, I would love to support you in those ways. I have sessions, half sessions and whole sessions that you can purchase and schedule directly on my website or in my link tree. And I also have some other things I've been working on that if you're interested in this content, that will be more fast, hot sheet-y. And I would love support on youtube.com/@ShayleeEdwards. Subscribe, share, etc. And I'm also becoming more active on LinkedIn and would love to be followed there and endorsed if you're so inspired. If you have any questions on how to do any of that stuff, just holler. Thank you so much for everyone who came out. I hope you have a beautiful day.